welcome to The Raise. I am your host, Jade, and I'm delighted to be here today with our guest, Cecily Motley. Cecily is a second-time founder, currently the co-founder of Harriet AI, which is a platform for busy teams. But her first company was a VC-backed jewellery company called Motley London. And Motley was known for fine jewellery at insider prices. They worked directly with some of the world's best independent designers to bring designs to the market without the markups. Cecily, really happy to have you here. Welcome.
Hi, really happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me to chat to you.
Oh, it's great having you. For me, it's about having founders that have been there, done it, and worn the t-shirt, all things related to fundraising. And you've certainly done that. I think it would be great because we're going to talk about Motley today. Um, it would be great if you could start by telling us a bit more about you and why you started Motley.
Okay, so Motley, I started my career uh, in the art world. So I worked for a big auction house, and then I ran a gallery called Louisa Guinness Gallery. And what we used to do there was collaborate with very famous artists. Um, and people like Jeff Koons and Nish Kapoor, and we would get them to make jewelry in limited editions, which we would sell mostly to collectors. And these things were completely amazing and completely unique. And they were often my contemporaries who weren't even close to being able to afford them
Mm,
were always really obsessed with what I was doing. So I had the idea, okay, could we do this for a broader market? Is there a way that we could get something around fine jewelry where we get really big designers to do something that people like me and my mates could actually afford? So
mm,
I teamed up with my co-founder, Ilana. We'd been mates at university. My background was more the kind of design art world. Her background was consumer. She knew the consumer space incredibly well. And we thought, cool, let's get together and let's do this. So she was working, I worked, I started working on it, then she joined, and then she quit her job, and then we raised an angel round, and then starting together working on it full time. Ilara actually quit her job before we had closed the round.
oh, that's amazing. And what point did you decide that you were going to go after angel money? Because you went from angels to VCs, and it would be great to hear more about that decision and that journey.
So, yeah, I think it's really interesting because I think we were definitely pushed in a like, is there a way that you can bootstrap this? Is there a way that you can do this without money? And the answer to that was not really, because what we were building involved quite a complicated supply chain. The core value proposition is we would take these amazing designers. It was a completely new operating system for the jewelry world and design world. We had plans to take it, into all decorative arts. So we'd get really famous, cool people to do the design, and
Mm,
then we would go out and find the manufacturers. So it did require capital. The reason why we could make these things affordable for people was A, the traditional jewelry industry has very, very, very aggressive markups. We were making in
mm,
silver, so it was still precious metal, but not gold, so much more affordable. And
right,
because you're making in silver, you have to make. We would do things in small batches, but you still need capital for stock investment.
right.
So we really needed cash to get going. So we couldn't launch the business because we had nothing to sell without any money. So we both agreed this was only going to work with capital. And I think I really felt at the time like you've got to put logs on the fire. If you've got something good, it's not going to take unless, you can't get a roaring fire unless you're going to throw logs on it.
Mm,
Um, so there was never really a question that we were not going to raise money. We were quite dedicated to doing that. Um, and so we went out to raise an angel round, and it was it was challenging. It was really
mm,
challenging. and with a lot of the thing about fundraising, which I'm sure you have found, is that it can feel extremely existential because
Mm.
you've built your business case, you've got a real vision. And also for me, I felt like, why would I waste my time on this if I didn't think that this, you know, for
Mm.
me, the only reason I would invest time is because I think that it can be an absolutely enormous business.
Yeah.
And for consumer, the UK consumer market just has much less confidence in consumer as an investable corner of the market. In the US, because it is such a big market, there's an immediate understanding of the ambition. So
Mm.
I think that this can be $1 billion business. Right, fine, sure. Yeah, I can see a consumer can be that big. Whereas I think, particularly in the UK and Europe, there aren't that many huge consumer companies. They don't really believe in the market. They're very, very suspicious of a
Mm.
company that requires stock to grow. And so it was a real battle. And I think part of that battle was to break a lot of assumptions that were not based on us in the room and our business plan. I think there was an
Mm.
assumption that jewelry was small. You know, if you
Interesting.
chatted to other people, I know my co-founder Alana found this really tricky. You might get asked questions like, "Oh, cool. Do you make it yourself?" You're like, "No, no." So I think we were not helped by the impression. Alana and I went out to build a massive design business, and we were
Mm.
met in the room as two women building a fashiony lifestyle business. And
Yeah.
we often had the feeling that we weren't taken particularly seriously, which we just couldn't really understand. And I have to say, at the time, I was like, maybe we're being sensitive. And now
Mm.
that I've raised for a technology business with a man, I don't think we were being sensitive. I think that was absolutely the case.
Yeah, it must have been a completely different experience, I can imagine. And part of that is the type of people that you end up speaking to. You're either going to be in the room with investors that understand, like you say, they understand the market and they're interested in the market, or those that aren't. So, how did you decide on who you would target, like who you wanted to speak to when you were raising?
Yeah, I think the idea that you have a huge choice about where you take capital from if you are the kind of business that is not a capital market hot ticket. And by that, I mean, when we were raising, even if we'd done this 2 years earlier, there was much more reticence around consumer. And actually, with good reason, they are saturated channels. You don't own them. You know, I think if you really understand the market, I can also understand why you would have question marks around consumer businesses. So there were a selection of consumer funds that were the obvious ones for us to talk to. Some of them had were interested in our like quite aggressive, ambitious view of the market, but had
Right.
invested in competitors. So not really competitors, but
Uh,
were also kind of one of the big funds invested in a brand that grew a few years before us at crazy speed called Majuri, absolutely huge.
right.
And that was kind of more the avenue that we were going down. But there aren't that many consumer funds, particularly in London, who have a very good understanding of an appetite for consumer. So we spent time that first angel round, you know, we had many smaller tickets rather
Mm.
than two big tickets. We raised about £360,000.
Mm.
Um, and in retrospect, that wasn't enough. But, you know, I don't, maybe if we'd gone out slightly more bullishly with we're going to raise 1 million, but that didn't really occur to us to do that. And it was a very bitty round, which I have
Yeah.
since spoken to female founders and to investors who work with female founders, and by all accounts, that is very common.
Yes.
A very bitty, gritty cap table and the way that I read that is you have people who think that you're very good and are willing to take a punt on you, but they're not willing to really invest in what you're doing. That's how I read that, whether because they're not comfortable with the market, whether for whatever reason. But I think it is interesting that that is a trend for female founded businesses.
Yeah, it definitely is. It's also you find there are more female founders that will say, "Oh, I didn't raise enough," or "I don't feel like we raised enough." So you find that they're undervaluing versus overvaluing the amount that
I
they need.
think I think I think that's true, but I also think it's about realism. Because if they'd
Mm,
had double the offers, they would have taken
yeah,
it. It's
yeah.
not, I didn't raise, it's really interesting that framing now that I look back at it. I didn't raise enough implies to me you had offers up to X and you didn't take it. But I think that's not the story for a lot of businesses. It's we fought tooth and nail to get to this level, and it was taking up a
Mm,
huge amount of time. And we decided to
yeah.
close. We knew that we would have done better with a bit more cash, but we just needed to get this closed and done.
Yeah, and I think from some of the founders that I've spoken to, it's also that nervousness of asking for more. Sometimes it's like when you're in the middle of the round, you've already thought we need 500k, but we've got to 350. Like you said, fundraising it's all consuming. It takes up so much time, and most founders would rather spend their time in the product, in the building. Um, but then there are also founders that I found kind of not cut themselves short, but said actually, like, how much should I ask for? How much should we raise? Can I reach that much? So let me just ask for this because I feel like that's doable. Um,
My
and yeah,
my biggest learning from I felt so uncomfortable in that first
mm,
fundraising process, and hindsight is 2020. It was the first time we'd done it.
yeah,
There's that existential dynamic where you're saying, do you believe what I believe? So you
mm,
don't believe in something that I'm dedicating my entire life to.
mm,
And I think I was more prone to take that view rather than, you're not interested in this market, fine, move on. I'll find someone who is,
mm,
don't see the potential, fine, you don't know this market well enough. So it felt very personal.
mm,
Um, but also, we took money from families and friends and family, which often happens in angel round. That's kind of what it's meant to be. Small tickets, we took it all,
mm,
and the weight of responsibility of taking people's money, which I now realize no one invests in a company unless they think that you're going to make money for them and that they're willing to
mm,
pay that money. Um, the weight of taking that money put a layer of pressure on the business that is not the case this time around. And I think
mm,
psychologically was very difficult.
mm. And well, I mean, saying that, it would be great to know, what was the biggest challenge that you and your co-founder faced in the middle or in the midst of that round?
So I think the biggest learning for fundraising is that it's not linear
Mm,
and input doesn't necessarily mean output. So we're taught if you work hard, and I've done my 400 meetings, so I should have my money now. Um,
mm,
and actually, it's not linear like that. You can have
mm,
these patches where you're you think you're running at 1,000,000 miles an hour. Oh, we're in final conversations with these two big funds. Oh, they're just fighting over us. And then suddenly they both drop out. Or you think, okay, the pipeline is looking really, really thin. And then someone comes in and that's your final investor and it's closed. So the hardest moments were in those swings where it always looked like this. Okay, maybe it's just not going to happen. And to keep the faith that, and further down the road, we got much better at this of like, somehow, somewhere, it just always happens. So keep going, keep doing it. It's really boring and everyone hates it, but you might find some interesting people along the way and try and take the how personal it feels out of it. And I think that's something that we came to. But to answer your question, what were the hardest moments for us? When it looked like one of those dip moments, maybe someone had pulled out. We had a difficult moment with we were having a kind of Series A, like bridge conversations. We spoke to a really great fund. They were really nice. They were consumer specialists. We'd gone really, 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 really far down the road with them. We're like, great, we can just get this done and closed. And then they didn't come through. And I think it was that moment of like, oh, okay, we'd really put a lot of eggs in this basket. Where are we going to get to next? And I think the angel round is one thing, because it's that we need to get going in order to do this.
Yeah.
Later down the road, there's this, we're burning through our cash. There's this existential moment. Maybe the business just dies because we run out of cash. And also there's your team, and having to communicate where you are in the process and how much of your own anxiety to share when you get there at the end. It's not really fair to put on your team those massive ups and downs. You've got to be transparent, but that balance of trying to shield them, but then you're taking on a huge amount of kind of stress when you're also working extremely hard. It's very difficult not to get to that point where you're like, well, what's the point in any of this? When you're very tired and very stressed and fundraising and someone pulls out, learning to pull yourself out of those dips, not go too low and not go too high, and just keep an even keel, I think is a real journey and life lesson.
Yeah. And I guess the big question is, how did you get there? Because I feel that's something that all founders experience. I've had in the current round I'm in, I think I've had at least 3 moments where I've been like, I just want to stop. And it's understanding how to like manage your emotions and manage your energy when you're in that moment. It gets a little bit easier, but it's still painful. So how did you and your co-founder get to that place where it's like, okay, we can pull ourselves out of the little hole?
So I would say in the first years of the company, we were really bad at it. And I think it put stress on our relationship. I think it put stress on the team, because we weren't good at, I think what we learned to do is have less time on the ups and less time on the downs. And I think, again, doing this again a second time, I just understand that this is all part of it. To what I'm doing now, you have a big customer and then you're like, great, this is going to be an awesome deal, and then it falls through. But now I'm much more like, well, that's an interesting learning. Well, interesting, fascinating. And I think, what can I have told myself then that would have made it easier? I think because it was my first business and it was both of our first business, we put a huge amount of pressure on this succeeding. And I think there's a layer of self-definition in there, particularly with founders. And I think that in some ways, the best thing that happened was that it didn't. It
Yeah.
wasn't this. It was, we did super well. And then, algorithms changed. Our acquisition channel got blown up with nothing that we had done.
Mm.
Facebook and Apple blew up our blew up. And I can speak to this later if it's helpful. And so what's the worst that happens? That happened, and
Mm.
and
Yeah.
and I'm running another business. So I think part of that deep depth was linking business to identity, all of those things. And I think the only way that you get better at that is getting really ruthless about it's my baby, but it's also my job.
Mm.
And I've made a punt with my own time. My biggest investment is my own time on this market. I think there's huge potential for it, and I'm going to go for it. If that doesn't work out, that's no reflection on me. That's no reflection on, I think there's a real sense of I didn't do it, a particular female founders, I didn't do enough, we didn't do enough, it wasn't. And I think if I had tried to view better, like what are the market movements? What is the punt that I'm making in a kind of like
Mm.
try to think of myself as an investor and
Mm.
being able to try and drive a little bit more detachment. But I think for your audience listening, raising money for the first time, I understand that's basically impossible to ask. But as a kind of Valhalla to try and get to, trying to detach slightly from
Mm.
you as business and your identity as business, I think makes it much easier to withstand blows. Um, yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's so true because it's that, like you said before, you've decided to put your all into something. And when you make that decision, it's then a very difficult thing to not take it personally because it is personal, because that's your livelihood is also a huge part of your life. It's what you've decided to, put your own money into. Founders put their savings into it, they put their salary into it, they put their time. Your time is your biggest asset because you can't get that back. You can make more money. Everybody goes on to make more money, but you can't recover that time.
Yeah, and I think that's exactly why it it's so stressful and can be quite alienating as well. I was really lucky to have a co-founder because, we were both in a position where, you understand how stressful it is, all those things put in. So I think either having a co-founder or a really strong founder network is a really good way to try and offset. But the thing again, having come through that and come out the other side, and bear in mind when I finished this business, I was like, over my dead body will I be starting another business? I just think it's really important that we know this. So it's like absolutely hard no, never again, absolutely not. That what was my point? What was I saying? Oh, I had something really wise to say, and now it's gone. Something about yes, okay. Now I go back, that idea of sunk time also really kind of haunted me. Sunk time, sunk money, because
Mm.
I'm not paying myself any money. But now I see the learnings, the ability to lead a team, to grow something from zero. I learnt an enormous amount. And that's ultimately why I decided to do it again, because I felt, how am I going to put any of those learnings to work unless I do this again?
Mm. No, I think that's important. And what founders have to remember, like you said, is that raising helps a business, but it doesn't guarantee anything. It's like it assists you. Motley was a huge success, but you wound down the business. And that was, like you said, that was a huge learning and a massive, I imagine, a painful experience to have to go through. But also, you've taken so many lessons into your new venture with Harriet. Um, it would be great I know you've like alluded to it, but it'd be great to learn a bit more about how that came to be that you got to that point last year.
Yeah. Let me, year before last, sure, I would be really happy to talk you through it. So, we founded the business in 2017, closed our H around 2018. And then we did a seed round with two separate VCs. We grew super fast. We then had lockdown. We did very, very well out of lockdown because marketing was cheap and everybody was sitting at home buying stuff to make themselves feel better.
Mm,
Um, and so the business grew extremely fast. Then we weren't quite at the stage where we could raise a Series A, but we weren't far off. And what we
yeah.
wanted to do was kind of hold back a bit because we were growing so nicely, get just a bit more growth under our belt because we knew that the raising market are always difficult for consumers. So we wanted to like keep our really stellar numbers. Um, and in order to go for a much bigger Series A. And so we decided to raise a bridge instead. We actually started Series A conversations, but we were in that kind of middle zone where not just a little bit too small. So we raised a bridge of 1 million. I was pregnant at the time, fundraising, raising this bridge, which was, as I've discussed, there were a number of moments in there where we were like, oh, and then you know,
Mm,
a lot of the capital came in kind of later in the process. We closed that round, Ilana and I was literally kind of signing the papers before my C-section. And then so the April, just as we closed that round,
mm.
there was a big change in iOS 14. And for listeners who don't know about this, I'll just briefly take you through it. All of our growth revenue came mostly from Instagram advertising. And what this change meant, it effectively made Instagram advertising much less effective on two fronts. So your ability to remember that jewelry is it's a considered purchase. Often people will want to see it a few times. And what we used to be able to do is we'd find ways of driving people to our website, and then we
Mm.
would be able to show them on Instagram what they've been looking at or something about the brand. So, and you had quite a big window from their first visit to when you could put them into these funnels. And what it meant was your ability to retarget those people. Our whole marketing strategy was about just getting people onto the website so you could retarget them. And that was a very fruitful conversion funnel.
Mm.
So your ability to retarget people basically dropped off, and your ability to build new audience groups based on your existing audience. For example, I know you like looking at this brand, and this brand. You're probably going to like our product, but your
Yeah.
ability to do that basically got cut off. So we went from growing, and this is also when the war with war with Ukraine had not broken out yet. Growing to basically flat. But Facebook was a channel for us where in prior times you kind of sometimes have to like buy your way out of the problem. You need to buy more
Mm.
data. So we essentially spent for a really big Christmas, and we had a
Mm.
like good Christmas, but it wasn't like the astonishing stellar 10x growth of the year before. And then
Mm.
war broke out in Ukraine. And we realized that we were going to we were probably one cash injection away from profitability. But just to give you a view on the impact of this marketing from a business perspective, we went from making £30 on every order, so first basket
Mm.
profit, um, to losing about that on every order, or not
Wow.
making 30 on every order. Maybe it was less than that, but we went to losing about £30 on every order. So our unit economics, it basically knocked out our ability to be an attractive, investable business. We probably could have, with one more cash injection, we probably could have got to profitability. At that time, war with Ukraine, investing completely dried up, hardest of consumer. And this was the time, if anyone remembers, VCs were being sending a message to all their portfolios being like, you're going to need 3 years runway. That's enough on growth. We just need to see profitability. And so we knew that we were not going to be able to raise capital. We fired half our team to make it super lean before Christmas to be like, can we get away with this? If we have a really big Christmas, we probably can. I bear in mind that I came back with an 11-week-old baby.
And I mean, it sounds like you also did everything that you possibly could. They did their best. And in different circumstances, it could have been a different ending.
And I think that is a big lesson as well of, sometimes these things are outside of your control. And it's really, really hard to swallow. It's really difficult. But I think there were a couple of things that we both learned on that journey that I now understand as like, this is what leadership is about, and they're passionate about it, and they want to bring change, and they want to, they want to do something differently. For us, we were really passionate about supporting these amazing designers and getting this great stuff into the market so that everybody could be part of it. We had this really broad vision. We weren't coming at it ever like, these are the really, but that is how you run a business, and those are the decisions that you have to make. And I think it is a rite of passage. So whilst it was unbelievably grim and unbelievably stressful, even from the first time that we had to fire a lot of people to the second letting the rest of the team go, we learned a huge amount.
That's also something that isn't really spoken about. We hear, I think what happens is with entrepreneurship in general, it's very much like, it's raising money, it's selling a business, it's becoming super successful, and kind of, I guess, the way the world paints success. But the pains that people have to go through, the stripes that they earn when they're going through that battle, that's not something that's often spoken about. And so whilst you take on this role of founder, you don't actually know what the job description is until you're in those moments.
No one really knows what they're getting themselves in for. Yeah, exactly. No one really knows what they're getting themselves in for. And then they're like, wait, hang on, did I sign up for this?
And plenty of moments like that. And I'd say, actually saying that, what are 3 things, or 2 or 3 things, that you think founders really need to prepare themselves for, or think about, as they're at the beginning of this journey?
That's a really good question. I would argue that most people who are founding businesses are, they've got a huge amount of initiative, they've seen a gap, they're going to go for it, they've got a level of kind of smarts and drive. So the bit that I think is the difference between finding it really bearable and being able to roll with the punches and finding it just unbearably stressful is the amount of work that you have done on yourself around. And I think that is profoundly feedback driven. What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? How am I going to hire around my weaknesses? How do I interact with people in the office? And I think if you're a founder, particularly if you're fundraising, you're caught between the projection force field of what we're going to do and this is what we achieve, and the executional for you and your team. And I think you need to be really clear what those modes are and not mess them up together. And I think the only way that one does that and unpicks who you are from what you're doing, and I think that can be a huge source of stress, is how much thought you put behind, like, who am I, what do I want, and that's about like receiving feedback from those around you. So I think the best, probably the best way to be equipped is to like have a coach or a therapist or someone who can help you shine a light on the things that you are going to find very stressful, the things that you are very likely to behave, the situations that where you might behave badly and why you might behave badly, and have a lot of tools around how you kind of understand yourself in all of those environments, because I think you are put into quite extreme states and in an isolated way if you're running a company. And I think that as a psychological position is quite an interesting one. And I think equipping yourself to deal with that is probably will give you more strength to be able to adapt, because the challenges will always be different. Whether it's like, I have to fire someone, is it the right choice to fire them? You know, you're going to have to make loads of difficult decisions, but just making sure that you are on an even keel and not, I think that is the difference between running a business and kind of being so stressed that you burn out and have to give up. And someone said something quite wise to me that I really resented at the time. I went I went to a friend's house whilst we were raising, and I was really knackered, and I was working really crazy hours. We all were. And I was in one of those phases that we all get into of like, I don't know if I can do this like this. And he said to me, what's the biggest threat to your business? I was like, well, I don't know, like, we run out of money. That's probably a big threat to my business right now. Or, you know, our marketing channel blows up, or, you know, we can't hire this person, or we can't. It's like, that's not the biggest threat to your business. And I remember being like, and he said, the biggest threat to your business is that you get so tired that you don't give a shit and you don't want to do it anymore. I think that is really wise. I think that is the biggest threat to your business, is you deciding, I just don't want to do this anymore. The cost is just too high. And I think it is really hard work when you're understaffed. You are going to have to work long hours, but do take holiday, do eat properly, do exercise, because the outcome of that is more threatening to your business than the thing that you're sitting at your desk trying to fix.
Yeah, that's really important. Actually, I was reminded of that a few weeks ago by one of my best friends. She said, you do realize normal people have 25 days of holiday a year. Why have you not taken a day off yet?
Well, I think I was really swept up in this idea of a founder, like, but this is what it is, you know, we never work all the time, and you know, that's just what it is, right? That's just like being a founder. I just work. And I look back at it and I think it's a stamina game. You've got to work quite high intensity for a long time. It's not 2 years. It's like 8 years, 10 years to get to a decent outcome. And I think just bearing that in mind, that you need to be at like race pace. So you can't sprint the whole way.
No, you can't. And I mean, it's a combination of looking after your physical and your mental well-being.
Yeah.
Because, you know,
But it
your
makes you a better
body.
leader, makes your decisions better, makes you better with that slightly difficult investor who's trying to really screw you on a certain clause, which. And okay, so the final thing that I think, what are the things? One, do the work on yourself, because it will make it less stressful for you. Two, build the community around you that will help you do that. So other people, you might think no one has been in this position before, it's so uniquely stressful. That will not be true. Anybody running, ideally, if you're in consumer art, have a consumer gang, set up a WhatsApp, you know,
Mm,
link with them on LinkedIn. Hey, I've found that typically people who run businesses are very generous with their time and
mm,
their insight. So take advantage of it. And my co-founder, Ilana, I would argue, I have learned from her to be much, much better at this than I was. Um, she was very good at like, I've got a problem, I'm going to go and ask someone. And when we got to a
mm,
structure where we disagreed on something, we would go and pull information from other people and be like, okay, how are we going to make a decision, pass this impasse? These are the other
yeah.
people who I've spoken to. So I think avoiding the like isolation or it doesn't, there is a way to do that, and being quite structured in building people around you who you can ask, whether it's for introductions to fundraising or
Mm,
it's like, what did you do with these terms? Because so much of the stress of our first round, I remember these moments so clearly.
mm,
How big should the options pool be? Have we done that right? Who should we use in order to issue the options pool? What's right?
mm,
How many shares should we be giving to our employees? What's standard? There are lots of people who, when they've done it before, have the answer like that, and it takes you a long time to work it out.
mm. And I think that is, I guess that's the, for first time founders, that is half the battle. It is knowing where to start in a lot of areas, where it's knowing where to start with the actual act of fundraising, knowing where to start when you're negotiating and talking to investors about terms, knowing where to start with your employees and how to handle them. It's all the first rodeo.
And the answer to that is ask. Get really, really, really good at asking. And asking is not, particularly for people who are really driven and really independent, of like, I've gone out and done this thing on my own. I think sometimes there can be maybe asking feels like failing, or maybe asking, I don't want to look like I don't know what I'm doing, because you're so often in positions where you kind of don't know what you're doing and are slightly blagging it. And I think just shedding that fear and going for it will make your life a lot easier.
Yeah, no, it does. I say this to a lot of people, but finding, it's like finding your tribe and finding the people that you really trust and value their opinion because they have your best interest at heart. That is so important because those are the people that you're going to have to lean on, especially in those moments where you're like, I'm exhausted, and you might need somebody else to pick you up a little bit.
There is one structure that I think is really helpful that I have come to later in my life, and it's through there are these two founders groups. One is called ICE and one is called Founders, and they have a structure where they encourage you in a kind of peer-to-peer interaction to experience share rather than give advice. And it is
Mm,
so powerful, because if you ask someone for advice, you either feel bullied into taking it. Everybody has different advice. It's so hard to know whose advice you should take. But if you ask them to speak to their experience, like, can you tell me when you were doing your round and you had these investors, what did you do? And you can
mm,
turn into advice, but it's really powerful. So when you were looking at the option pool, why did you decide to do that? And
mm,
take from it what you want without having to be kind of slightly strong-armed or not, or like, oh, actually, I reject that advice. It's really powerful.
that's a really good tip. Something that people should do more often because yeah, but there can be a lot of resistance to opinions, but there's less resistance to hearing someone's lived experience. So no, I love that piece of advice. And my last question is, if you could go back and do it again, would you do anything differently? And if so, what?
So I don't think that there was ever really an opportunity to do anything differently. when I decided to start the business, I didn't do it from a position of strength. I had this real sense of like, I've got a really weird CV, you know, I've kind of got nothing to lose here. And I think there are things that I've learned from that business. Things like if you are building a business that is reliant on capital injection rather than a path to immediate profitability, make sure you understand the capital environment, the fundraising environment. So if you're going to require loads and loads of cash to make this business huge, are there people who put money into this kind of business to make it huge? I think in a way, I wouldn't have changed anything, because if I'd done that, maybe I wouldn't have done the business. Maybe we would have said, I think we're going to find this really tough. And, the big challenge of being able to build, a business that people absolutely loved, that was still a difficult business. I think that's to do with the market. So would I have done anything different? I don't think I could have done anything different. I don't think I had the wherewithal to do anything different.
Yeah.
I don't know what I know now. So the only thing that I think could have helped me would have been to start. It sounds so naff, and I hate this kind of chat, but like start the journey of self-knowledge a bit earlier to try and work out what bits you were going to find really hellish and what,
Mm,
you know, so you can do loads of stuff to make it work a bit better for you. Like make sure you're not just doing the tasks that suck your soul until 11
mm,
p.m. every night, which I spent quite a long time doing, and not the stuff that I really enjoyed, which would have made it all a lot easier for me. So
mm,
there's some kind of like tactical stuff, but would I have done anything different? I don't. If I was me now, which I am now, and I'm telling you, I'm not doing another jewelry business. I'm doing an AI business. If that tells you something. But I don't think I could have done anything different then.
No, I mean, I think that's completely fair. And also you don't know until you know, do you? It's until you get to that point where you have the knowledge, and you have the experience. But I mean, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing everything. I can only imagine how challenging it must have been to go through everything that you went through with Motley, to come out the other end and decide that you want to do it again, with a different, a different business.
It's great. There's one other thing that I do think, actually, that's not advice, but from my experience.
Mm,
From my experience, I think there is way too little investment in the co-founder relationship. It should be run like
mm,
a management relationship. There should be catch-ups every month. That is a huge threat to your business, falling out with, and a huge stressor. And I
yeah,
think investing the time in development sessions, one-to-ones, rigidly and rigorously, and putting structures and processes in making that relationship successful,
yeah.
which often people forget to do, I think is the difference between, for many people, success and failure, but also between like having a really, really stressful time and having a really supported, high pressure, but partner in crime environment, and it's chalk and cheese.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people say that co-founder relationships are like a marriage.
Yeah,
You have to choose wisely first.
and keep investing in making it successful.
Yeah, no, that's like a great piece of advice, and something that I'm sure a lot of people,
Experience share.
yeah, something that I'm sure a lot of people can relate to. So again, like, thank you so much. We really appreciate having your time, today, because like you've dropped so many gems, and I can imagine that it's going to help so many other founders to go away and feel seen, for one, because it's nice when you can say, "Oh, that's been my experience too." I think a lot of people feel very seen from this conversation, but also walk away with bits of knowledge that they didn't have before. So thank you.
No, my absolute pleasure. It was nice to chat about it again and to remember, we built awesome stuff and the like tricky bits along the way. And, if anyone wants to reach out to me or ask me about anything, I'm always happy to chat and always want to support other founders. So let me know.
Oh, amazing. Well, what we'll do is we'll leave like links to contact you, like your LinkedIn,
Yeah.
or other social media. We'll leave that in the in like the comments below. But also just want to say thank you to everybody that was listening. I hope that you enjoyed this conversation. Don't forget to subscribe, but also drop us a message if you have any suggestions for other amazing founders that we can interview, or any questions that you would love us to answer, because we'll try and plug those into the next conversations. But again, a huge thank you to Cecily. And yes, we'll be back with the next episode soon.
Thank you.